Welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcast on demand. Thanks for hanging out. No, thank you. Thank you for hanging out here on a Monday. Smash that subscribe, smash the like, come and join us in the chat. A lot of business, lot to break down here on Upon Further Review Monday. We do have our Upon Further Review, some of the little tidbits that we were able to pick up on since the Instant Reaction show. We have Poll Assassin, where we will be reacting to not just some of the rankings movements, but also some of the interesting ballots that we have seen in the wake of those week 3 scores and results, headlines, and much, much more. Fantastic job on a Sicko Saturday recap. Tom, Bud, y'all banged it. It was fantastic.
I mean, did we do too well? People are asking. I think that's the guy that said this might be Chip's burner account because Chip doesn't want to have to do late night Saturdays anymore. He's like, you guys are the best 2-man show. How much did Chip pay this guy? People are asking.
People, hey, listen, we're don't FOIA any of my phone records, please. All right, so
never mind.
One of the
Chips,
one of the games that was going on, and we were getting updates throughout the Instant Reaction show, was all the latest. We'd had the fumble, scoop, and score. The fumbles. Oh god, this game's getting a little bit crazy. It only got crazier as Colorado outlasts Colorado State in double overtime. Lots to get to in terms of the bigger picture, the fallout. Hey, Danny, we'll get to the fallout in just a little bit. But are you more Travis? All right, you want to start with Travis Hunter? That's the most significant piece of this, right?
The cheap shot, yeah.
Yeah, the cheap shot that's going to knock Travis Hunter out for a couple of weeks. Awful, just sort of violent cheap shot. And now we've got a situation where Colorado, as it goes into Oregon in week 4 and USC in week 5, with the official diagnosis reportedly being, out a couple of weeks, has not been defined any further than that as far as I've seen. I'm not expecting him to play for either one of these games. What did we learn about Colorado, as it did have to finish this game and finish off this win without its most outstanding pass catcher and arguably overall athlete?
It was, first of all, it was a phenomenal game and back and forth. The Henry Blackburn hit, why didn't he get ejected? Is it
because it wasn't targeting, so it's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
he lead with his helmet.
Isn't there room though within the just the official's power to say, you know what,
like conduct?
Yeah, personal foul, you're gone. Even that being said, I think Jay Norvell, I think the Mountain West, I think somebody should come out and he should be reprimanded. I think it's a bad look for the sport. If he faces 0 repercussions, it just sets a horrible tone. So I think something should come of it. Travis Hunter, I hate it. You're right, because it's going to be a stretch here, and you don't want any excuses, and you just want to see their best, right? Because I think it's going to be an uphill battle. I think we all think they're going to struggle, or it's going to be much more challenging for them, and you want to see them full speed. So there's nothing. And then my last takeaway, Shedeur has been kind of rising up these charts, and I think for all of us, we've kind of been like, all right, it's still lesser competition, but he's still dealing and he's phenomenal. And all of a sudden he's Mel Kiper's projected number 1 overall pick. When I hear that, I'm like, I don't know. Let's slow down a little bit. The last 2 scores, the 98-yard drive, I am becoming a big believer in Shedeur, the playmaker, the ice in his veins, just as a legit quarterback that absolutely deserves to be in the conversation with Caleb Williams, Drake May, Quinn Ewers, Michael Penix. He absolutely deserves it. I mean, it was, and to take the hits that he took, including another dirty hit in this game, when he got absolutely leveled, guy lands on him, didn't flinch one bit. I thought he's a warrior, man. So I am liking Shedeur more and more every time I see him play.
So Skip Bayless said that it's a lacerated liver for Travis Hunter, and he's going to miss a month at least. However,
listen, I'm not going to disparage good Mr. Bayless, but how about let's go with our own Carl Reed? Says,
I just saw that. Carl says that he's out for 3 weeks, according to Dion. But Carl did Carl say what it was? I don't think Bayless would make the lacerated liver part up, obviously.
That makes a lot of sense too, like that diagnosis, because he was able to come back and it was probably starting to bother him worse. And then the fact that he was hospitalized after does make more sense. That's brutal.
Danny,
Skip
what did you
Bayless
think
is
about
too
the
busy trying
forum
to
on the
blame
eye
LeBron
poke?
for it.
Well, that's the other thing, because it did seem like the coverage, especially on social media, was very much how Colorado State was dirty. It was dirty both ways.
Yeah,
Do you guys think? I mean, is it? Yeah, I mean, you don't want your quarter. You don't want anybody doing the eye poke. I mean, that's as cheap as it gets as well. But it's kind of like an eye for an eye. You got my guy. That's why I thought the officials sucked. I thought they let the game get out of hand a little bit, and they were just bad. So yeah, I just thought it was, and I do think, and this is probably all of us, it's not just Jay Norvell or Dion kind of clapping back and the war of words that's taking place, but it's already a violent, emotional game. You add another level to that, stuff like that's going to happen. That's why I thought the officials early in the game, almost one of those ones that you see like in Little League, or like Pee Wee football, where you pull over both, and you don't have to just pull over the coaches. You guys need to get your team under control. And how many penalties were there? 17, like for 1-8, like at halftime, at some point in the game, you call you have to have that message with the coaches.
17 for 187 on Colorado State and 10 for 87 on Colorado.
That's kind of what you expected, given some of the pregame back and forth, right?
Mhm.
You're warming up with the Rolex on, like guys are going back and forth each other. You got the little pregame, what are we gonna call that? Like, certainly not a fight.
Shenanigans.
Like
Scuffle.
Shenanigans, scuffle, like they're not physical, just a little pregame meetup, little pregame smack talk. It certainly was dirty both sides. It's really unfortunate, obviously, obviously, like Travis is going to miss 3 or 4 weeks, right? Like, that's not good. That's one of my favorite guys. Like, I like watching him play a ton.
Especially with Oregon coming up.
Broadcast wise, they were very lucky they had Louis Riddick on, like a guy that like knows personnel and has worked in front offices before. Because I thought the broadcast was just so Colorado, and like clearly it was, because you wouldn't go to this game if it wasn't a show. We saw Van Pelt's tweet saying, like, hey, nobody told Colorado State this was a show, that they showed up for a fight. But like as the game went on, it was like, oh, they didn't do a lot of prep on Colorado State, right? Like they're like Louis Riddick saved that broadcast butt, because he knows what he's looking at, and he's like, hey, that's an NFL guy. Like, that's an NFL guy. If it's some random dude who has not worked in personnel, I think it would have been a real disaster.
That's what got me in trouble too, because as I was watching both, networks go there, and you're watching the coverage, it was so lopsided. I really wish I tweeted you guys something or texted you guys something in our group chat. Like, if you would have said
the play-by-play guy was terrible. Like, that was ridiculous.
But I'm talking about the preview shows in general. Like, we didn't hear from Norvell. We didn't hear from a player. If you would have said, can you name me 3 Colorado State players or just their quarterback, I think you would have gotten crickets from, like, can we just talk about one segment? Because I get it's about Dion. I get that. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I started to like Colorado State more. I'm like, they must be livid. Like, they're not even talking to us. Because, like, when you go back, anytime there's a game day show, they have put both coaches on air. They have them both out there. They trot them out there. They interview them. It was so lopsided. And I get it, but it just feels so desperate to grab onto the Dion hype train. And that's where I was getting. So, like, I got a lot of heat when we get to but like, it was more about the coverage was annoying, because I still think Dion's great for college football. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
Like,
he's bringing in so many like guys who aren't college football fans into the sport right now.
Yeah.
And I hope they stay. Like, especially if, look, Oregon's a 21-point favorite this weekend, right? Colorado is leading the nation in yards lost due to sacks. This thing will turn back into a pumpkin at some point.
I have a question for you guys. Did anybody that was either talking about the game or coaching in the game know the overtime rules?
But we know Colorado didn't.
I don't think Colorado did. And I know I want to clear it up, because there was like a lot of confusion, because Colorado started with the ball first, which is not something you see very often. Usually
because Shador did not.
Yeah, they didn't know what to say.
Colorado botched that. Like, that is
100%.
Yeah, the coaching error there was. But look, they didn't play very many close games at Jackson State because they had more talent than the rest of the league combined.
I just want to make clear for our listeners and viewers that in overtime, it is not alternating possession, it is alternating choice. And you just see every team choosing to be on defense first because that way they know what they have to do when they get the ball. But it is not alternating possession because there was a lot of confusion about that on Saturday night.
Yeah.
Is that like alternative facts? Alternative choice. Everybody just gets to choose their own adventure in this new overtime. Everything's fantastic. Do you think that Colorado State should have gone for the win?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Because you have your best 2-point play.
Yep.
Danny, you know how you do this. On Thursday, we're going to rep the 2-point play, okay? And then we might rep a second one just in case. But, you have one 2-point play that you're going to use because you probably haven't used it so far in the season unless you've had, a lot of low red zone stuff. And it's the one you feel good about. If you're going to run that at some point, why not run it then to where it can win you the game? Not going for the win, I thought, was an error, especially because you didn't have the pass rusher who was really messing up Colorado, Kamara. Once he's out, it did strongly tip in Colorado's favor.
There was also the punt too on 4th and 1, was it?
Oh, instead of going for it.
Yeah. But they coached scared at the end of that game.
Well, because the thing is, if you go for it and miss, Colorado can still drive down and score, and it leaves you with an actual realistic chance to run your real offense to come back and maybe kick a game-winning field goal, which at altitude, I mean, Danny, you played in Denver, are much more makeable. 50-yarders happen up there more than they do elsewhere. So
they're in Columbia, Missouri, the only two places where you can drill long-ass field goals.
Also, too, that was insane. I try to taste consistent with the takes. And I remember, I think we all had the same exact reaction, which again, no one brought up on the broadcast. No, not one oh, what about going for 2? Not even a mention. But last year, Alabama, LSU, Brian Kelly goes for 2 and wins the game. And even if you don't, I would not have criticized Jay Norvell for going for 2. You'd be hey, but the same exact thought I had against that Bama LSU game, you can't let Bryce Young go out there and beat you. The same exact way with Shedeur. You can't let Shedeur beat you. You have to control that narrative, especially when your best defensive pass rusher's out of the game. You played right. There was just so many things because I thought Jay Norvell outcoached him for 57, 58 minutes. And then in the last few minutes and in overtime, I thought that's where they clammed up. They did for sure.
And to your point about Shedeur, this is leading that comeback in the fourth quarter.
They had all the momentum. Yeah.
Let's go. You don't give him the ball. Okay, Danny.
Look, also, we're not perfect, and we would not make great coaches. There are certain things that are just.
Well, I would.
You don't need there's really no excuse to botch the overtime thing.
Right.
That's just those are errors you can't make. But you can make them if you have a huge talent advantage over the rest of your league. We are learning about how Dion is as a coach in close games. He handled it extremely well at TCU. They did mount the comeback here, but how has he ever coached an overtime game? Did they have an overtime game at Jackson State? Maybe
they have one in
year 2.
Didn't they have one in the bowl game?
Changing too, right? I mean, you might be thinking okay, so crap. What is this? New setup that you've got going in?
But he also has a former head coach as his offensive coordinator who should probably be filling him in on this stuff too.
Yeah.
A lot of experience on that staff. Danny, what's the current level of feud? Are we at a 7 or an 8 with you and the Sanders family?
Yeah, I think so. It's been an interesting 24 hours, I would say, on social media. And I get it. I definitely poked the bear. I put it out there. That was a shocking one to see that one, especially after now, do you guys think that poll is leading or implying that I think they shouldn't? Do you guys think does that poll? Because that's all I did was put out the poll. Should you storm the field? And it was already a debate that was starting to rage. I saw some Jack McGuire with Barstool with those guys. He said, I can't believe you did it. I saw Big Cat say, oh, absolutely. So I saw the debate kind of going. I was genuinely curious. All right, what do people think? Is this obvious? I didn't have a huge problem with it. I'm I get it. You guys have not been relevant for 15, 20 years. It's the emotion. I thought the outcome of the game, overtime, absolutely played into it. If they beat them by 3 touchdowns, they don't rush the field. I thought it was perfectly acceptable. So I just thought it was a poll. It was all right. And then all of a sudden, I open up I'm like, why are there so many comments on my, like, why are there so many reactions? I'm like, geez. And then, I saw Deion's son come out with the comment, and I was like, oh boy, here we go.
I do think storm the field and 24-point favorites imply
you meant
think we should
Clemson.
not.
Yeah, maybe these Colorado guys are a little self-conscious here. I thought you were talking about Clemson because they do the storm, like the field storming every single week, and they were 24 over FAU, and they beat them. You meant Colorado, huh? Okay.
Yes. It definitely caught me by surprise. So Sunday was interesting to say the least. Because then it's like, what do you do? Like, do you respond? And I did. I was just like all class, like just kind of whatever. It'll be interesting to see because I don't like, and it's, there's been some wild takes as far as I'm all of a sudden anti-Deion. I think I've been excited about Deion. I think I've been happy for success. The Florida State comments absolutely bothered me, but we hashed it out. I called him out, and that was Deion, primetime that was responding to me. I was just kind of surprised by the response there. Do you think Deion does his own tweeting? Because I have a hunch that maybe he doesn't, and it was his son that responded to me the first time, but he didn't want to say this from the primetime account.
Possible.
Yeah.
I also noticed that they ignored all the tweets where you were saying wonderful things about Shador.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right.
Look, it is a show.
Mm-hmm.
Hey.
And it is work. And he is, think about how many millions I know the sunglasses thing, but what about the free advertising, free recruiting? And he mentioned it. He's like, yep, I hope all your recruits are watching this. What we can be.
After
The Rock talking about him
was on game day,
Yeah.
The Rock was on
For
game day.
him.
He was like, Deion Sanders is changing college football, and you want to be a part of it. And Deion's just sitting there. He goes, recruits, listen to the man.
Why
And
doesn't
it's
The
just
Rock
so-
do
I
that for
get it.
Miami?
Yeah. That's a great question. How pissed are you if you're Mario Cristobal?
I
He
know.
ain't making it easy.
Wait, what the? What are you
What?
doing, bro?
I think Cristobal will be all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
It'll be interesting to see.
Although, look, they did beat him on Cormani McLean,
Mm-hmm.
who isn't playing yet, I think, right?
They did have The Rock on to break down Miami's 3-0 start and go game by game the rest of the way. So he put in some time for Mario as well.
What is probably the most, and this is more like serious, like the most disappointing thing is like the cries of racism and like that, like really bothers me because I'm not, and it really gets to you. And that's like a lot of what's built in, and I can see it coming when they do lose. And I don't want that but this is what happens when you're that brash and confident, and it happens in any walk of life. The minute you struggle, the people that are jealous or don't like your brashness and your cockiness and your confidence are going to come out. And then there's this very quick, and the thing that I think it's going to happen is going to come from analysts or people on TV are going to say, oh, we don't, this is why it's happening. And I think it's human nature we see it all the time. People built up in the media, and then they're ready for the fall, and people want to come crush you for it. And it's just, I think it's going to be ugly, when they do lose.
The one
I
thing
hate that.
common in mankind throughout our entire history is we build people up and then tear them down the very first opportunity we get. That is every culture, every civilization through time.
I'm
If they do
excited.
go over.
What
Gotcha.
in the next? I was going to say I'm excited they've won these first three, because if this was going to be 1-5 through the first 6 games, or 1-4 through the first 6 games, then it was just going to be toxic inside and out, right?
Yeah,
right. Like a lot of big picture statements, and it might not have even given the players in that locker room a chance to respond. I think the fact that you've got these 3 wins in your pocket, then you try to endure, you realize what the real measuring stick is out there in the Pac-12. And look, on the other side of USC on September 30th, there are more winnable games, as we've gone over and as we'll continue to break down. So
Let me ask you a question then, Chip.
all right.
After watching that game on Saturday night, you still feeling 8 wins?
So we've already got 3, and I definitely
you
think
look bad.
what?
Arizona
Yeah.
State looked bad. Like,
I'm saying Arizona State, Stanford, Arizona gets us to 6.
I think there's 6.
ASU is pulling the trigger, and that thing ain't firing. Like they're out of players. Like I think they had like 8 offensive linemen they thought they could play, and they're without 6 of them. And now they're out 2 of their, maybe their top 3 quarterbacks. So it sucks because you still got to play the remaining 9 games, but they're just out of players. It looks like.
I'm done because all I kept thinking is I thought they were going to lose that game. I have no idea what this team is because coming in the season, I'm like, oh, they're going to lose the first two and then they're going to beat Colorado State. And they did the exact opposite. So I'm like, I don't know. And that's why I'm scared to touch them against Oregon or USC. I think they get boat raced, but I wouldn't be shocked. I just think the offensive and defensive lines are a very real issue that's going to get exposed.
No, yeah. Let's go ahead and table that for
we got a big game
September 28th because that sounds like a lock fight. If you think USC's defense is keeping Shedeur Sanders in check,
we did not get an answer.
Come on.
We did not get an answer on Chip's feeling on the 8 wins though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, probably 7, right?
Okay.
You know, like I just
need 6 for that 50-1 shot.
I went and got 6 really easy, and then the question is at Washington State, Oregon State at home. You know what happens in a UCLA game where there's probably going to be 100 points? You know, who knows?
I don't know if they're easy though. Even like you're going to get everybody's best shot now, just like they got against Colorado State.
We'll see. Coming up on the other side, speaking of poking the bear and doing a little bit of trolling, man, it's been a while since Lane got up and hit a home run. But he is needling Alabama while they're down. We get into that. Plus Poll Assassin. And upon further review. Next.
It's time. The best Transformers yet.
There you go.
Is now streaming on Paramount Plus.
This is going to be fun, man. Now that's top tier manifestation.
Transformers Rise of the Beast. Rated PG-13. Now streaming on Paramount Plus.
One of the big games of the week here in week 4, an absolutely loaded week 4, is an SEC West showdown between Alabama and Ole Miss. Now, as Bud and Tom detailed in the Instant Reaction show, 0 questions have been answered about this Alabama offense, specifically the quarterback position. But it is an attention on the defensive side of the ball where Lane Kiffin has decided to, at least drop some. And listen, as context here, who is Lane Kiffin's defensive coordinator right now? Pete Golding, who may have gotten, we'll see about his exit from Alabama staff, but not a lot of coaches willingly leave Alabama staff if Nick Saban is super happy with them and they're happy being there. So this is what Lane Kiffin said. If you're watching right now on youtube.com/cover3, it's on the screen. We've been against Kevin Steele a number of times, worked with him at Alabama and against him at Auburn and LSU. Seems like there's been a change there. I don't know what happened after the Texas game, but our guys watching the TV copy and schematically in the last game, the win against South Florida, certainly seem like T-Rob, cornerbacks coach Travaris Robinson, certainly seems like T-Rob's now calling the defense. We've played him before at South Carolina, so we're preparing accordingly for him calling the defense. He's done a good job too, and they've got really good players.
All right, so this is absolutely Lane trying to mess with Nick Saban.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's fairly obvious that there's some stuff going on staff-wise at Alabama. But I don't know that it's super obvious from watching the film. This is where I'm interested in this. Like, the TV copy for that game was weird because of the lightning delay for Bama USF over the weekend. And they only had 2 camera angles for a while due to, like, cameraman safety. So did they get some kind of, like, look on the sidelines as to whether T-Rob or Steele was calling this thing? Or... and here's where I think it's probably more of an interesting tweak by Lane, because he may have really looked at it and said, okay, you could either see who's actually calling it, which seems unlikely, or you could see different things that they're doing schematically and say that's a T-Rob thing and not a Steele thing, which to me, and I don't know the game as well as Lane does or as well as the guys on Lane's staff does, but to me that seems unlikely too, actually, especially because they played USF. USF runs a carbon copy of the offense that Tennessee runs. You probably don't want to show a whole bunch of different things to Tennessee as far as here are the new things that we've learned to defend Tennessee's style offense, which, by the way, Lane Kiffin runs a similar type of offense, and you'll see him next week. So I thought Bama kept it extremely vanilla in that football game. Like, why would you show Because the last time you faced this thing, Tennessee absolutely destroyed you. Like, why would you show anything new? I tend to think because Lane coached for Nick and because all these coaches talk, like it's a whole sewing circle thing. I don't think he's wrong, but I don't think he got it from watching Bama's defense. I think he probably got it from talking to people because I think he's actually right about this. I think that they may have had to simplify some things and let T-Rob communicate to these kids a little better. I think maybe there's a chance that Nick Saban went back to the stuff that brought him comfort, running the ball, good defense with Kevin, who I had back in the day, getting the band back together type stuff. And I don't know how well that worked. I actually didn't think they were that bad against Texas, right? I thought they did a pretty good job and forced Texas to make some high-level throws, and Sark was really in his bag. And Ewers, who had never thrown a deep touchdown pass in his life, went 6 of 8 on balls over 15 in the air, and including a PI. Like, really good play by Texas. But I think Lane's right, and I think what probably annoys Saban more is that I don't think Lane got it from watching his defense at all. I think Lane got it because people in coaching circles talk.
I mean, I think Alabama's defense looks different because Quinn Ewers was actually able to complete long passes past it, which is something most quarterbacks haven't been able to do. So from that aspect, sure, it looks different. I think you're right. If Lane is correct, then it's not from watching and crushing film. But I also think you hit on something there too, which, I mean, I mentioned this in Slack this morning with Chip in the college football Slack room. Like, if you look at a lot of the underlying metrics and the predictive metrics, a lot of areas Alabama still looks really good. Like, even if you look at the 17-3 win over USF on Saturday, from a down-to-down success rate standpoint and that kind of stuff, Alabama dominated that game. They just didn't score points, which comes back to what Alabama's real problem is. It is not a schematic change on defense. It is not as who is calling the plays and who is in charge. It is the fact that Alabama has now gone through 3 quarterbacks and none of them have done anything to inspire confidence in the rest of the team. Like, there was the report today about the players only meeting where we kind of hashed things out and let out our feelings and blah, blah, blah. They needed to hold that meeting without the QB so they can just complain about them and talk about how they're holding this team back, because that is Alabama's problem right now.
Well, like, did you see Josh Pate's tweet? Jordan, pull that up. No, just the tweet.
Well, while we get it, I totally agree with you, Bud. I don't think, because Kevin Steele's in the booth, you never know who's calling the plays. Like, even if you had camera on the sidelines, somebody's signaling them. They have headsets. Like, you don't know who's behind the philosophy. Maybe you could tell a little bit schematically, but in no way would you be able to, like, just say, oh, this is a different person calling plays.
So Pate said, I believe Alabama had players disagree with the staff's quarterback decision and give a no-show effort in response.
Was this on Sunday night's show? So this was after the USF game?
Yeah.
Last night.
I did think it was weird when Milroe was leading him out of the
And he also said he thought Milroe was suspended.
Whoa.
That was interesting.
So, I saw that Milroe was like giving him the pump up talk to him in the tunnel. Milroe led the team out, and I was like, yeah, well, that's interesting considering the biggest storyline heading into this game is how he's not going to start anymore. And then he didn't play at all, right? I mean, it was just Simpson and Buckner.
And both of them were terrible.
They got a massive problem at quarterback.
Are they going to lose to Ole Miss?
They could, yeah.
I think they go back to Milroe.
So that's what I was going to ask you guys. What do they do now?
But now we know. Like, could they win the SEC if Georgia somehow doesn't get its act together, or if LSU stumbles? Maybe. But they can't win a national title with Jalen Milroe. Like, if I get actually on this, then maybe I'll just quit. But with the way he passes,
watch out, bud.
Yeah, we kind of know what their ceiling is now. If that's who they have to go to, that's a problem, guys.
There is a massive problem. I think there's 2 ways to look at this, because I do think Milroe probably took the high road. You saw with Jalen Hurts, the way he was, praised for handling the situation when he got benched. I mean, I think it's very
McElroy this morning kind of went the other way on this. McElroy said, apparently this is from tweets about McElroy's show. I don't have the actual audio. Milroe didn't handle having to share reps with Simpson and Buckner last week. I assume in practice he means, and that's why he didn't play. McElroy said, when you saw Milroe congratulating them on TV at USF, McElroy said that's not how it went down in practice last week.
So things are great.
I don't want to throw him. I don't want to throw him under the bus, but we did do a show for a while together. There was the same kind of sentiment about Jalen Hurts that a lot of it was public.
Got it.
You know?
Okay.
But I mean, because I think the coaches,
I
think they're probably feeding them some information too. But I do think I don't know what they do, because if it is like, if you go back to Milroe, who I completely disagree with the decision to bench him before that game. Like, if you didn't like Milroe, why the heck did you roll him out there the first 2 games? Like, if you were that unsure and you kind of, and I think they didn't. I think you probably have a power dynamic struggle between Tommy Rees and Nick Saban over who is supposed to play. And I think Nick Saban probably, that it didn't delineate itself. You couldn't tell who was the guy. Saban's like, we're going to go with the guy that's been here. We're going to go with the veteran. He's mobile. We saw him last year. He can handle the moment. And he looked great against Middle Tennessee. And it was probably like, yeah, that's why we did it. And then against Texas, it was awful. And Tommy Rees is probably like, I can't throw with this guy. Like, what do you want me to do? Let me get my guy a chance. So then he gets the opportunity. And I do think there's probably an issue in the locker room over the new guy versus the guy that's been there and probably does have a better relationship. It is a mess right now for Bama.
Well, if you play receiver at Bama, you're pissed because you went there to catch balls and they don't have anybody who can throw the balls to you.
Among the 3.
Correct. And
because that's the thing, is like Milroe struggles against Texas. Like some of this, as we discussed for a week, should be Texas's defense passing a huge test. And now we look at what happened against USF. I mean, not being able to get it done against USF is staggering.
No doubt.
Well, I'll say this, like it is impossible to throw in that type of weather. And even when it kind of goes, everything's still kind of, damp and the balls are heavier. It's just a crazy, uncomfortable feeling for a quarterback. But you know what you do in that situation? If you're Bama, you line up and you cram it down their throat, which they couldn't. That to me is like, what happened to this offensive line that was supposed to be the best OL that we've seen under Nick Saban?
Do you, Danny, like you played quarterback, do you read into like offensive linemen not picking up a quarterback after they get sacked? Like not helping them up?
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely want to be picked up.
Because that happened a couple times. Like, kid got
Yeah.
rocked and the O-line, maybe there is stuff there. I don't know. Like this is very speculative, but clearly there's something going on.
I will say
USF's
neither
not
Buckner
good.
or Simpson turned the ball over. So,
Did you guys see the sad video of Saban walking through the tunnel like after the game? Like, it was sad. Like he looked worn out. Like they're walking to the locker room through the tunnel, and he just looked. And I would expect it. But he just
Not how he wants to go out.
Hey,
Right.
Bud, I'm joining your team. I heard
think he's done.
on the instant reaction show, Bud just threw it out. He said, Tom, you think this is it for Saban? And he's starting to say, like, I think this is wrapping it up. I'm starting to believe that this might be it.
I don't see him going out like this, though.
Well, how do you see him going out?
I see him rallying the troops for a transfer quarterback this offseason that will fix a lot of problems and get this team back in contention to win a national title.
We'll see. All right.
I will say he should call Bill Belichick and they can commiserate about how much more difficult it is to win when you no longer have a QB.
But you don't think my half of the SEC West jobs opening this offseason is as crazy as it was a month ago?
No, but it's the SEC. I mean,
I
I
will
feel like
say-
half the jobs can open up at any given time.
Sam Pittman, his buyout goes down a lot if his record at Arkansas is under 500 by the time or at the time of termination.
Wait, the Arkansas team that blew 2 different double-digit leads in the same game at home to BYU?
Yeah, that one.
Yep, the Arkansas team that has a realistic shot to lose the next 4.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. Coming up on the other side, 2 orders of business we still got to get to. We still got to break down the new AP Top 25 poll, some interesting rankings movement, and of course, a couple interesting ballots and more of our takeaways from the weekend that was. It is upon further review. Coming up next.
Freddie! Surprise!
Dad!
What's going on with your son?
Wish I knew. He's got a girlfriend I've never even heard of. When I told him I wanted to spend more time with him, he said no.
It's just not a good time.
Have you considered that he hates you?
Don't Don't sit there. Those are Christian Lacroix pillows.
So we can't sit on the couch.
Not in jeans.
You know, got out some Halloween decorations yesterday. Just made me start thinking about our good friend Jeff Banks and one of my favorite Monday segments. This is Pool Assassin. Not a whole lot of change in the top 10. In fact, 1 Georgia, 2 Michigan, 3 Texas, USC at 5, Ohio State at 6, Penn State at 7, Washington at 8, Notre Dame at 9, all stay in place. Just a 1-spot swap for Texas and Florida State after the Seminoles escape with a close win after a late charge from Boston College up there in Chestnut Hill. Other big changes. We saw a massive drop for Tennessee after the loss at Florida. The Gators arrive in the poll at number 25. Any other movements of note? Some other 2 to 3 spots shift throughout the rankings. Something stand out before we get to individual ballots in terms of what's changed.
I was a little surprised Alabama fell 3 spots just because it struggled in the win. Like, I thought that getting the win and the fact that, like, Utah played Weber State, I didn't think it was going to go drop in 3 spots. I thought it might drop out of the top 10, but that was a little bit of a shock. Yeah.
I agree with
Can
you
we
on
talk
that.
about? Can we talk about the elephant in the room?
No Clemson?
I mean, what? Well, Tennessee played Florida, right?
Oh,
And so, and Florida got a big win against Tennessee. And yet and I get it, like, if they're kind of far apart, it's deep in the season, but we just saw what unfolded. And wouldn't we all agree that Florida, like, significantly looked like the better team? It wasn't fluky. Like,
yes.
And Florida lost to a pretty good Utah team that's in the top 10 or top wherever they are, top 12. So,
All right, to push back,
okay.
Utah was missing a ton of guys, including their top 2 quarterbacks in that game.
Okay. Still, what they've done since then, they've remained. It is a loss against an 11th ranked team on the road. And you're right there in front of each other. Your eyes see this dynamic unfolding. You couldn't just put Florida above Tennessee. Like, is it that hard? I just think so many people are like, oh, we can't drop Tennessee that far.
Early season, you can. I think early, because you're right, Danny.
Yeah.
When you've got a bigger body of work and there are other wins that you can grab onto and say, like, look, it was just one Saturday. Tennessee didn't play well. Florida won the game on their terms in the only way that Florida could win that game. Credit Florida, but we're not going to throw Tennessee in the trash can. But Tennessee's just got wins over UVA and Austin Peay, an FCS team, and one that's getting really close to being rated on the level of an FCS team. So I don't know what you're holding on to for the Vols.
I have a very easy solution for this problem. Don't rank either Tennessee and Florida and rank Clemson and Missouri instead.
Missouri probably should have been in the top 25. I thought, because, and
Yes.
y'all mentioned this too, I did get a good bit of the noon window in, and that was just a competitive game between teams that were on the same level. Like Kansas State and Missouri, they played 10 times. That ends up going 6-4, right? You know, like it is, it is a compliment to Missouri with the way that they competed in that game. So I would have thought that Missouri should be a top 25 team. Kansas State checking in just behind them. If you want to throw Tennessee out, I understand, but that's not what Audrey Dahlgren wanted to do when she put Tennessee at number 14 on her ballot this week.
What?
That's
14?
not what Michael Lev wanted to do with Tennessee at 15 on his ballot this week. If you want to know why Tennessee's still in it, it's because Chuck Landon and James Williams both have them at 16, with Florida nowhere to be found.
There are still 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 voters who have Tennessee in their top 20.
I will say one of the, and this is kind of jumping into UFR a little bit on this game because I don't think we need to talk Tennessee, Florida twice more after we talked it on Sunday night. I went back and watched this. I don't think Milton was quite as bad.
Oh,
Lord. Got a lot of
meanest thing anybody said about Joe Milton yet.
I don't think Milton was quite as bad as I thought he was watching live. I did not watch the game with the sound on, right? Because like I've got multiple TVs going. You really, unless you're really a psycho, it's hard for me to watch games like with multiple soundtracks going at the same time. If anybody has some tips on that, let me know. I didn't realize that Mincy didn't play and Cade Mays didn't play. And it's pretty well accepted that the Tennessee backup offensive linemen suck. So Florida was able to light box them really well, like meaning they did not have to break out all the blitz stuff that we talked about on the show. Would they or would they not? I guess Mincy had some stuff happen to him midweek, so we'll see kind of if he's going to be eligible to play for them this week. And Mays is obviously pretty important for their center. But Florida whipped them up front. I don't really think that Jordan is saying cited for possession for Mincy. Yeah, on Thursday. So whatever on that, but he didn't play. Still interested to see Florida's blitz package be broken out. I don't think Milton was quite as bad on a down-to-down basis. The bad stuff was still pretty damn bad, but he did have more pressure without the blitz than I expected him to in that game, and he didn't handle it super well.
The other issue I had, again, I don't like complaining because it's Florida State, but if you want to drop Florida State, by all means, drop them 3 or 4 spots. But to move Texas ahead, I mean, they were tied up 10-10 going in the fourth quarter against Wyoming. Like, if you just box score checked, you'd be like, oh, Florida State only won by 2, and Texas won big.
Danny, they did. It was on the Longhorn Network. Right. Oh, I mean, like, of these AP top 25 voters, they have struggled enough in their hotel rooms or as they're traveling or getting quotes in post game. Like, they are only getting whatever's on your basic cable package in press boxes and hotel rooms. There is no way you can expect that they had eyes on Texas, Wyoming beyond the final score.
And if you want it, because I think you should shuffle around. I have no problem with Florida State dropping. I actually think it's good. Like, give them motivation before Clemson. Why aren't we moving Washington up? Because they have done nothing but be spectacular. And if you want to move them ahead of Penn State, go ahead. Pick one, move them up 3 or 4 spots. They deserve it.
Within their own league. Why is Washington not ahead of USC? Like, Washington, you can think Boise's not any good, and you can think Michigan State's not any good.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But they've smoked everybody they've played. And it's, I think, incontrovertible that Washington has played a tougher schedule than USC, right? Like, Nevada's on that USC schedule. San Jose, with a bunch of guys out, is on that schedule. Stanford, which just lost to an FCS team, is on that schedule. Like, Washington has beaten Tulsa, a Boise team which is not as good as it once was, but is still not horrible, and Michigan State.
Boise is better than both the Mountain West teams that USC has beaten, and it has beat Michigan State on the road.
Correct.
And by the way, the CBS Sports 133, with all of its genius voters, has Washington jumping USC and Ohio State into the top 5 this week.
Good
because
job.
we are rewarding teams that are like doing what you are supposed to do every single Saturday. That's not what Georgia's doing. That's not what Alabama's doing. There are other 3-0 teams that have not done what they are supposed to or expected to do, and that's all the Huskies have done.
Why is Notre Dame
in the
behind
country?
USC?
It shouldn't be.
Is it just Caleb? Like, if you tell me from a power rating standpoint, I buy that.
And Tom said on Saturday night, he was like, look, I'm not going to put Washington number 3. I'm sorry, but I'm not putting words in your mouth. You're like, I'm not going to put Washington at number 3, but if you are, I don't think that's a crazy thing. No way. You did?
I put him at 2. Yeah. I wasn't lying. I said I wasn't going to put him at 3. I will say, I'm just going to say it. Washington is a wagon. It joins Ohio on the wagon. It is just a phenomenon right now. And I want to shout out while we're on Poll Assassin, because I've called him out last week for some odd ballots, but my guy David Jablonski is just, this is a man who thinks for himself.
He's a free thinker. He is the second most free thinking voter right now among the electorate.
There are 20. Well, that's the thing. Matt Baker has the least whatever ballot, but that's just because he has Florida State at 1, and I think he had Alabama at 22.
He has Alabama at 22. He's the low man on that one.
I'm gonna go Matt.
There you go, Matt, longtime friend and listener. But Jablonski's got 25 teams on his ballot, and he is the high man or the low man on 5 of them. So 20% of his ballot. He's got Texas at 1, Washington at 2, and then Michigan. He's got Georgia at 4th, which, is the low man on Georgia. And frankly, considering what Georgia has played and how it looked against South Carolina, that's a perfectly defensible place to put them, because I know they're the 2-time champs, but they have not looked outstanding. He's got Colorado at 11. He's got Duke at 13. Oregon's 15. Mizzou is 19. So it's just, he's definitely a free thinker. And while I don't agree with everything he's doing, I do at least appreciate the fact that he is rewarding teams early in the year for actually playing well and winning big games.
Fresno State is at his number 25. I love
Mhm.
that right there. I mean, they've got wins over Purdue and Arizona State already.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's
They've got more
Florida,
Power 5
but no
wins than a lot of Power 5 teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
we-
good stuff. All right.
You talk about number 24, Iowa.
Sure.
Are we
Your
sure
favorite
Iowa's
team.
a top 25 team?
They're not
That's
allowed.
top 25
Iowa
defense.
State lost to Ohio, and Ohio's a good team.
Wagon. Some
I
would
will say, let's get an update here on the Iowa State drive for 325. Brian Ferentz needs to average, or Brian Ferentz. They did score 40. This
Yeah, that's the
weekend.
thing is everyone celebrated the 41 points. They don't
Yeah.
realize because they're not following Bud's Save Brian Ferentz fund that he needed to hit 45 or else we were going to have to disperse those other points to other games. The standard has been raised on the rest of the schedule because the Hawkeyes didn't score enough.
It's one time I was interviewing Jimbo, and we asked him, I think it was about special teams or something. And like, I think their kicker was really bad, or the punter. And he goes, y'all got debt. You can't just wave it away. Right. like this is piling up. Right. Iowa's got debt here. They needed to score 45 by my projections. So I've had to reallocate or redistribute the 4 points that they missed by only scoring 41. They did go for a fourth down to punch it in to give them those 41 over the weekend. So we need 13 at Penn State this weekend, 24 at home against Michigan State. Could be doable. 35 at home against Purdue, 17 at Wisconsin, 21 hosting Minnesota. Going to need a full all out effort. 35 at Northwestern, 30 on Rutgers, 21 against Illinois, Nebraska 24, a bowl game 21 to get that 25 average. If they do win the West, we have not talked about this aspect yet. I think he's getting fired if they win the West because like they would face either Penn State, Ohio State, or Michigan.
And it would bring the average down.
It would definitely tank their average.
Yeah, so tank a
Have you guys
game
thought
so you
about this?
don't have to play.
Is it automatic firing or what? Because we brought this up last week. I think was like, well, what happens if they go 11-1 and they're in the Big Ten championship game, but they average 23? You know,
contract terminates, so it doesn't mean they can't give him a new contract. I kind of assume he's going to be gone and go to the NFL. You know, at some point. Not at the lawsuit settled.
I talked about this a bit on a different podcast with Chip last week.
Or not settled, rather, just went away.
I think it's a bit. I don't think it matters.
I don't think they care.
I think Kirk Ferentz said all this stuff in the offseason to get people to shut up. I don't think, as long as they keep winning and doing what they're trying to do, I don't think Brian Ferentz is going to be fired. In fact, I think the only true part of this is that if he doesn't score 325 points, he will no longer be the offensive coordinator because Kirk's going to retire and name him head coach.
I've altered the deal. Pray I do not alter it again.
wow.
I'm telling you, I just, it's fun, but I really, I really don't believe the sincerity of the 325 chase anymore. Just watching the way that they're playing, because if he really felt like he was in danger, he would be trying to run up the score. They don't care.
It looked like he cared when he was chewing out Cade McNamara and chucking the headset, though.
But that's because Cade was making mistakes.
Yeah,
I don't think they care about how many
yes.
points they're scoring.
Yeah, so we got to keep it up again. Big game at Penn State. See if you can go get yourself over 13 to change it up. Last week, I forgot to call for it. I forgot to give all of our awesome audience a look into another one of our great animations. So let's go under the hood. It is a Monday tradition, a pun for the review. There were terrible calls. Do we want to go ahead and jump in?
After further review.
After further review.
After further review.
So on the instant reaction show, Bud did, he was highlighting the MAC and he was like, man, like look at, all these different results, all these different teams. We've got ourselves a real MAC race. And I tearfully have said goodbye to the Atlantic and Coastal Division and have not really highlighted the fact that we also said goodbye to the Mountain West Mountain and the Mountain West West. We are divisionless out in the Mountain West, and the Mountain West in week 3 went 8-2 against the spread on a slate that had 7 Power 5 opponents. Now, of course, there were only 2 outright wins in that group. Wyoming keeps it close. They cover the spread. San Diego State keeps it close, cover the spread. Colorado State as well. But UNLV, sadly, took down Vanderbilt, and then the aforementioned Fresno State win over Arizona State. So as we're looking at the top half of this conference, and Air Force, absolutely puts the work in on Friday night, this conference title race is looking kind of wild. Now, we were talking about Boise not looking like Boise. Who do y'all think should be the favorites, or who should we be eyeing to wind up in those last 2 spots in the Mountain West title game?
Based on what I've seen so far, I think Fresno has to be the one team that you really have the most confidence in, because as we just mentioned a few minutes ago, they've got Power 5 wins against Purdue and Arizona State. And although Arizona State looks like it's going to be a smiling dumpster fire for the rest of the season, but I think that just overall, Jeff Tedford is doing the thing Jeff Tedford does, running a well-coached, good football team.
I think it'll be Air Force and Fresno State.
Yeah.
Air Force has that kind of that feel to it, because you always get the offense, which is a pain to prep for. And if they're the one that hasn't adjusted anything, right? You see Army and Navy trying to do something different. Air Force is like, no, we're good. We're going to keep running this thing. And they also, they have just they have a little more innovation to theirs. And their defense is legit.
Defense is really good.
Yeah.
Air Force gets bigger guys too, right? Like, isn't their conditioning tests a little bit different in terms of the size? Like, Air Force's guys look bigger.
Anecdotally, yes. I don't have heights, weights in front of me right now, but I would say that they don't look as outclassed against Mountain West competition, like when they're on the field week in and week out from a size perspective.
Yeah, as long as you're not in the jet, you don't have to be a certain size.
All right, teams that could win it. I think it stops at Air Force could, Boise could, Fresno could, Wyoming could. If San Jose gets all their guys back, they could. Colorado State, if they stay healthy, could. If Fresno is not as good as we think they are. Like, if Fresno is as good, like that first game for Purdue was pretty wild. They had a lot of guys out. Obviously, Arizona State had a ton of guys out.
What about Danny's beloved UNLV Rebels?
UNLV cannot, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, like I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no to San Diego State. I'm going to say no to UNLV.
And I think Utah State's a no, but honestly, like on a down-to-down basis, they were not horrible against Air Force. They did have big-time turnover stuff early that was just a disaster. And
I think you've got 6 teams that can win it.
I think it's pretty deep.
I think it's 3.
Yeah, I think 6 is fair.
You only think 3, Tom?
Yeah, I think Air Force, Fresno, and Boise are the only 3 that could win this league.
Like Nevada, New Mexico, UNLV, Hawaii, and San Diego State are clear no's. And I think UNLV is a no as well. Like,
what happens if Boise State doesn't get there and Andy Avalos is 8-4?
I don't know. I mean,
because Brian Harsin, does he go back?
Ooh,
because he's just sitting out there, right?
So that would be a strange situation, because after Harsin left and took the Auburn job, there were a lot of Boise fans who were very much on like the good, we didn't want him here anymore anyway kind of train. That could be kind of an awkward reunion with the fan base. But maybe, absence makes the heart grow fonder, because Harsin wasn't as good as Chris Peterson. But now that you've seen what's followed Harsin, you're starting to realize, you know what? Wasn't that bad with Brian Harsin in charge, was it?
I've got 1 or 2 others, but I don't want to hog this all. What else has stood out for upon further review? What else we want to bring up to wrap up the week?
Deuce Knight just committed to Notre Dame. Quarterback. We have him as a 4-star, just outside the top 200 nationally right now. Kid out of Mississippi. I got to see him play. I think it was at overtime. I don't know. A lot of these summer recruiting events run together. Kind of wiry, kind of whippy delivery. Wasn't great when I saw him in person, but I think some of the film's pretty interesting. So definitely an intriguing guy for the Irish at quarterback.
Speaking of the Irish, I wrote about this morning a little bit.
He's a 25, sorry, not a 24.
I wrote about this a little bit in the Monday after. This is 25 years ago. Audric Estime is the #1 Heisman candidate. He's a running back at Notre Dame who leads the nation in rushing. and nobody even knows his name for the most part, because we talk about Sam Hartman, we talk about all the quarterbacks, but he's averaging over 8 yards per carry. He leads the nation in rushing by like 70-something yards, and he's averaging 4.7 yards post-contact per carry. So, like, if you want to just say it's Sam Hartman and a great offensive line opening lanes for him and he's taking advantage, fine. But he's broken more tackles than any other player in the country and just is completely destroying teams.
He's a beast. I'm a big fan of the way that man runs.
Go
ahead.
Was Parker, was he offensive line background or tight end? It's the other thing too, like the play calling. They might try to feed him a little bit more. He has got a great personality too. Gerard him on the radio show. No, Audric.
Was he good?
Yeah, he was really good personalities. I mean, that helps. You get, you start getting some of these profiles done on you. I think we'll find out this weekend if it's got legs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, if he or Sam or both, they play well and take down Ohio State, man, this weekend's so much fun.
I cannot wait to watch the Notre Dame offensive line versus Ohio State's defensive front. That is the number one thing going this weekend for me. And
that sounds like something we'll be breaking down in a not mid-game breakdown. No. We'll be doing big game breakdown on Wednesday's show. Are the Pitt Panthers going to be in a bowl game at the end of the 2023 regular season? Because right now they are 1-2 with the only win coming against Wofford and losses to Cincinnati and West Virginia. Their remaining non-conference game is at Notre Dame in South Bend, and their conference draw includes North Carolina, Florida State, and Duke, three of the teams that are ranked in the top 25, with road trips to Wake Forest and home dates again, road trips to Virginia Tech and Wake Forest, home dates against Louisville, Syracuse, and Boston College. I can get you 3 wins on that remaining schedule. Do you see 5?
No.
We were from ACC preseason dark horse to not in a bowl game. I think that if a way too early quarter poll, 3 games in takeaway was the one of the steepest falls that I have seen through the first 3 weeks of the season.
I mean, let's go back a couple of years. Pat Narduzzi had an offense that was scoring a ton of points, was winning a ton of games, had a Heisman finalist, and nearly won the ACC. He didn't want that.
Win the ACC.
I'm sorry, they did win the ACC. Yeah. He didn't want that. He wanted to go back to smart football. Don't beat yourself, just low scoring, don't make mistakes. And he's got a quarterback who's making way too many mistakes. And that style of play does not work with a quarterback with turning the ball over as often as Jerkovich has turned it over. And it's one of those be careful what you wish for kind of things, because Pitt is really suffering this year because of it.
I think Jerkovic looks hurt. I'm not saying like you shouldn't be playing him hurt because he's going to get further hurt, but there's no way they went through fall camp with him looking like that. Like,
What's
and
the backup
spring,
look like?
Pretty raw kid in VU from Penn State who transferred. I mean, some of these balls he's throwing just look like it. Do you guys remember when I was convinced last year that Hall was hurt for BYU and they just wouldn't say anything? And he played like crap. Yeah, played like crap for like a month, and then as he healed up, and then they're like, oh yeah, he was kind of banged up. I was like, oh, he was. Curious, weird. That's how Jerkovic looks to me. Like, I watched that whole Pitt game. The way he's throwing the ball just looks really off. Personally,
but he's looked like that for 2 years now.
That's fair.
Yeah, I was going to say that the whole body of work seems like he's kind of. But you mentioned, I mean, on a very different scale. But you mentioned Jordan Travis as someone who kind of always seems to have something going on. Maybe Phil Jerkovic is like that as well. Pitt faces North Carolina at home this week. Then you get at Virginia Tech. That should be an opportunity for a win. Then Louisville at home, at Wake Forest. I mean, you've got to go through the next 4 games, and you've got to find a way to get 2 wins, or else this is a season that's going to start moving in reverse fast.
I was very wrong about that team.
Yeah, hey, listen, that's okay. All right, any other?
Oh, did you see? I guess Beanie Bishop, the DB for West Virginia, called him.
Yeah, trash. Said he wasn't very good. We weren't
worried. And so the quote seems really inflammatory, but to hear the delivery, he's very matter of fact about it.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, we broke down the tape and he just wasn't a good quarterback.
That's rough. I'd rather have a guy talking wild smack about you than that. It hurts way deeper.
Yeah.
I have assessed this man and he is not good.
Not good at his job. Yeah, that was
If
the
he's
quote.
not hurt, I feel really bad for him.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And you'd gone there to link up with your old offensive coordinator. I mean, it's not going well for the Pitt Panthers as they try to steady the ship following a 1-2 start. All right. Anything else?
One more.
Yeah.
The Pac-12 made a mistake doing away with divisions. Because I think there could be a chance they could get 2 teams in the playoff. Why aren't we? And I was honestly wondering, why aren't we having that conversation? They do all play each other that last month of the season, but if you had a 1-loss team that was right there, and maybe they still can, it just feels like they're going to all cannibalize each other, and then you're going to have a second loss, because I don't think you're going to have an undefeated team. But if you had all 1 loss and you had 2 1-loss teams play in the championship, Pac-12 championship game, and then you had the one team that didn't make it is there and is really good, lost to one of those teams, you could have that situation that we've seen unfold before when you have divisions.
You have auto wins now in this league, though. Like this is going to be a really interesting thing because there are 6 teams that I think are pretty clearly, at worst, top 20 level football teams. And then you have 3 that are somewhere between 35 and 65 in terms of on the national scale. And then you have, 2 that are just
Poopy.
auto wins.
I think that as long as their champion comes out with 1 loss, that at least propels them to the playoff in a way that a 1-loss Pac-12 champ had no chance to do in some of the years previous. Some of the years previous, Pac-12 was facing that scenario where they needed to be undefeated to have a shot. I think having so many good teams at least allows for 1 loss to be able to stay in the national championship hunt to this point.
As does the spotlight put on the league by Dion.
100%.
Because all these games are going to be getting attention.
100%. As we mentioned, it is an absolutely stacked weekend, which is why we love to try to get ahead of it even before Thursday's locks show, give you some inside info, a look at the matchups, the X factors, the storylines we are looking to play out. It is big game breakdown, and it is coming up Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Come and hang out and watch us live. We appreciate everybody that does. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernell. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me